Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming today. We are discussing stress this week. And normally, when we talk about stress, when we Google stress, it is perceived as something that we actually don't want to deal with, something that is perceived as foreign to us. And we either need to manage stress to deal with it, or ideally, it's better if we avoid stress at all, if we get rid of stress. So we do perceive stress as not the part of us, not the part of our normal condition, but as a foreign body, something that is not natural, something that we need to kind of manage or ideally get rid of. And this is the problem, and the concept of stress is quite ambiguous in this way, because all of us, we do feel it, but at the same time we feel it as not natural. We feel it as something happening with us, as something that's not supposed to happen. And I will show you a video, a popular TED video about stress, and we'll critically discuss it after.
Cramming for a test? Trying to get more done than you have time to do? Stress is a feeling we all experience when we are challenged or overwhelmed. But more than just an emotion, stress is a hardwired physical response that travels throughout your entire body. In the short term, stress can be advantageous, but when activated too often or too long, your primitive fight or flight stress response not only changes your brain, but also damages many of the other organs and cells throughout your body. Your adrenal gland releases the stress hormones cortisol, epinephrine, also known as adrenaline, and norepinephrine. As these hormones travel through your bloodstream, they easily reach your blood vessels and heart. Adrenaline causes your heart to beat faster and raises your blood pressure, over time causing hypertension. Cortisol can also cause the endothelium, or inner lining of blood vessels, to not function normally. Scientists now know that this is an early step in triggering the process of atherosclerosis, or cholesterol plaque buildup in your arteries. Together, these changes increase your chances of a heart attack or stroke. When your brain senses stress, it activates your autonomic nervous system. Through this network of nerve connections, your big brain communicates stress to your enteric or intestinal nervous system. Besides causing butterflies in your stomach, this brain-gut connection can disturb the natural rhythmic contractions that move food through your gut, leading to irritable bowel syndrome, and can increase your gut's sensitivity to acid, making you more likely to feel heartburn. Via the gut's nervous system, stress can also change the composition and function of your gut bacteria, which may affect your digestive and overall health. Speaking of digestion, does chronic stress affect your waistline? Well, yes. Cortisol can increase your appetite. It tells your body to replenish your energy stores with energy-dense foods and carbs, causing you to crave comfort foods. High levels of cortisol can also cause you to put on those extra calories as visceral or deep belly fat. This type of fat doesn't just make it harder to button your pants. It is an organ that actively releases hormones and immune system chemicals called cytokines that can increase your risk of developing chronic diseases, such as heart disease and insulin resistance. Meanwhile, stress hormones affect immune cells in a variety of ways. Initially, they help prepare to fight invaders and heal after injury, but chronic stress can dampen the function of some immune cells, make you more susceptible to infections, and slow the rate you heal. Want to live a long life? You may have to curb your chronic stress. That's because it has even been associated with shortened telomeres, the shoelace tip ends of chromosomes that measure a cell's age. Telomeres cap chromosomes to allow DNA to get copied every time a cell divides without damaging the cell's genetic code. and they shorten with each cell division. When telomeres become too short, a cell can no longer divide, and it dies. As if all that weren't enough, chronic stress has even more ways it can sabotage your health, including acne, hair loss, sexual dysfunction, headaches, muscle tension, difficulty concentrating, fatigue, and irritability. So, what does all this mean for you? Your life will always be filled with stressful situations, but what matters to your brain and entire body is how you respond to that stress. If you can view those situations as challenges you can control and master, rather than as threats that are insurmountable, you will perform better in the short run and stay healthy in the long run.
So, you recognize yourself in this video. So this is how stress is normally presented. It's normally presented as something negative, something is better to avoid. This is why probably this video is so popular. The thing is that in this video, they start claiming that stress is a feeling we all experience. So they do claim that we all experience stress, right? And at the end, they also claim that your life will always be filled with stressful situations. So they simultaneously present it as something not foreign to us, something we naturally feel, something we can't avoid. And at the same time, they show the gravestone twice in this video. So, and this is kind of catchy. The problem is that if stress is not foreign to us, and this is what happens on the level of our biology, this means that this video basically represents life as it is, right? Life is something that kills us. We die because of life, and life gradually wears us out. And then we die, and the gravestone is inevitable at the end. We can, if it's not foreign, if stress is natural, meaning the only option we have is to speed up this process or just slow down this process. And we can maybe sometimes choose over what we feel stress and what kind of life wears us out, but not always. So the most popular comment under this video, yeah, the gravestone. The most popular comment is, now I feel stressed, now I'm stressed about my stress. And with a lot of likes, so meaning people actually do react in this way. The problem, if you remember Alenka Zupančič's idea of self-gulag, this kind of representation of stress as something you need to avoid, as not healthy, as dangerous, and at the same time presenting it as you can't avoid it, it is part of this paradigm that we are within, and that is catching us and making us feel stressed over our stress, or feeling additional stress just because we naturally feel stress. And this is the problem. This is the vicious cycle, because we can feel the stress over stress over stress over stress. And maybe without these videos, we will just stop on the initial natural level of stress and try to deal with it, not with the stress over stress. So this kind of alarming presentation of stress, it might be advantageous for popular psychology, who are known to present their services in how to reduce your stress or how to get rid of your stress. Basically, because we all feel stress, and it's very potentially profitable to promise people that they might not feel stress if they know some tricks. Now, there's always this ambiguity about the concept of stress. It was always presented as natural, as a part of life, or even as life as such, but at the same time as negative, as a deviation from a natural state. Recent endeavors to present it as natural are, for example, articulated by Daniela Kaufer. She is a recognized neurobiologist, and she claims trying to emancipate kind of stress. She claims that it's not always negative. There is this perception, popular perception, that it is negative, something we need to avoid. But on the other hand, stress is very important for our survival. It helps our for us to survive and to adapt for what is coming along in our life. So there are always these endeavors to emancipate stress, and always both from the side of popular psychology is normally stress is represented as something to avoid. It all started with the father of stress. Hans Selye is known as the father of stress, the one who coined this term. He actually borrowed term stress from physics, and initially it wasn't his goal to talk about stress. He was going to find new hormones, female hormones that are not yet known. He failed in what he was doing, and precisely he was doing it through trying to introduce extracts from cow ovaries into female rats and all other weird kind of things. He failed to discover a new type of hormone, but he discovered something else, something interesting reaction. Precisely whatever stressor was introduced, something that will be called stressor later, like cow ovaries into female rats, or extra heat, or bright light, or physical trauma, or excessive exercising. Rats, the body of a rat, and it turned out that human bodies too, and animal bodies as such, they presented a similar kind of reactions. No matter what the stressor is, there would be stressor-specific kind of reactions and neutral kind of reactions. So some reactions that are universal for all stressors, including psychology. Will be based on its concept of stress later, psychological trauma, or some psychological reaction, for example, on bad news. And Selye, initially, before he started to talk about stress, he came up with the idea of the general adaptation syndrome. This is how he called this general reaction, universal reaction of a body on different stressors. He divided it into 3 stages. The first stage is the alarm reaction, when the stressor is introduced. The second stage is the stage of resistance or adaptation, when our body or rat body is mobilizing its forces to adapt or to deal with situation. And the level of exhaustion, when we are exhausted, or rats are exhausted, and don't have forces anymore to adapt or to deal with the situation. And on a biological level, Selye's initial refined idea of biological manifestation of stress is now associated with HPA axis, as you probably know, meaning that the most, as you saw from the video, the most important thing that stress is associated with is HPA axis, hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal axis. And initially, the signal, the stressor influences our hypothalamus, and then hypothalamus through the pituitary gland signals adrenal cortex, adrenal glands to produce cortisol and other hormones specific to stress. So there is this universal adaptive reaction that Selye called stress. He defined it as non-specific because it's not specific to any kinds of stressor, it's just universal reaction. Adaptive because it helps to mobilize energy and to adapt to a certain situation, and general reaction of the body to a novel situation. It is important to understand that it's not specific and it's not a harmful situation as stress is normally understood. It's not necessary the situation that is that bodies react with the stress are not necessarily harmful. They just new. They're new, therefore we need to adapt to them. It's just about novelty. It's not that much about if they're harmful or if they're not. It's something about novelty that we need to adapt to. He claimed that it's non-specific response of a body to any demand, and everybody always under some level of stress. Even if we are asleep, still our body is active, and this means that there is a certain level of stress, and we only don't feel stressed completely when we are dead. Meaning that for Celia, he presented and he understood stress as life, as process of life as such. Meaning as well that it's kind of useless concept because we already have a word life, and we understand life as more or less struggle, which makes it kind of empty at the same time. He also claimed there is a good example of him when he trying to explain that it's a reaction to a novelty, not necessary to some harmful stressors. And in this example, he claims that if mother is told that her son died on a war, she would be stressed because obviously it's harmful information, it's traumatic information, and she would need to mobilize her forces and to adapt to this situation. But on the other hand, if mother would be informed that this is the wrong information, or if she will see her son alive, this is also stressful information because she already partially maybe adapted to the previous news, and now she needs to adapt to completely new situation when her son is back alive again. So it looks like those are completely different stressors. One is bad and the other one is good, even though our body reacts with stress, meaning this universal adaptive reaction to each of them. For this reason, stress is not necessary reaction, again, to something bad. It is a reaction to something new, precisely because it's adaptational reaction and it helps us to adapt to this new novel situation. This is a picture of a cat to show that it's not necessarily harmful situation that causes stress, it's just novel situation. This is the messenger cat from Stalingrad battle. And you see, we know there is a messenger cat because we can see a note on his collar, meaning that the cat was delivering a note. And we don't see signs of stress. And cat was able to do his job. But you see the cat. Meaning this is just to demonstrate that normal pet cats, if they hear the sounds of war, if they hear the sounds of firing or gunshots, they would be scared. They would be stressed out. But this cat was raised hearing those sounds, and he apparently managed to adapt to them. They were not new to the cat. And maybe if a cat would be placed in some quiet village after that, he would be stressed because it would be too quiet for the cat. So it's not necessary that there is something naturally bad. It's not always that there is something naturally bad for our bodies, that our bodies react with stress, or naturally good. It's matter to a large extent, it's a matter of novelty. If we need to adapt to it, or it's not new to us and we already adapted to it. And stress also because it plays adaptational role, it's also the level of stressful reaction can be also reduced gradually in some situation when you are exposed to the same stressor. For example, when we react to alarm clock. Sometimes first, if you want to wake up in a different hour, it might be stressful, and the fact of alarm clock might be stressful. But then later, if we repeat this situation is repeated, we manage to gradually adapt to it, not fully, maybe, but it's getting better because of this adaptational reaction. Yes, and the other thing is if you remember the video with the gravestone, it is true that stress is killing us, but not so much because there's something wrong with us. It's just because life is killing us. So every stress leaves a scar, and organism pays for its survival, for this adaptational reaction with becoming a little bit older. And at the end, it basically kills us. And there is no way out of it, like popular psychology would imply that there is. We basically, because what we do during our life, we do survive, we do adapt to novel situation, and we expose ourselves to novel situation. Each day is a little bit different from the other one. And the need to adapt to the situation, the very need to live life is what kills us in the end. And if you come back to psychoanalysis, this is the Lacan's idea that we initially are traumatized, and that every trauma is just the repetition of initial trauma of just existence. And the formation of any new experience, acquaintance of every new experience is a scar that forms us. So any new knowledge contradicts the old knowledge, therefore it's novel, therefore it's at least tiny bit stressful. And it's not only that those biological factors are stressful, but also people and situations and tasks that we have in our lives are stressful. And unlike psychology might imply, popular psychology might imply that they might not be stressful, a tiny bit they are, at least a tiny bit. Otherwise, we wouldn't perceive them as tasks. At least if they perceive them as challenging, it's still a good way to call stress. To name a stress. And in a video, if you remember, they suggested at the end that there are going to be always stressful situations, but it's a matter how you perceive those stressful situations. The trick here is that stressful situations are stressful because you perceive them as such, because your body perceives them as such. There are no stressful situations per se. For example, for the cat, something that we think is as such stressful situation, the situation of war, is not stressful anymore. Just because the cat got used to this stressful situation, it's not stressful for the cat. So stressful is our subjective perception, the perception of our body. If we don't care, it's not stressful, right? If we care, it's stressful. So we might start have a feeling that everything's under control. This is what's called stress management. But initially, we need to go through this stage where we feel that those situations are stressful. The other thing is eustress concept and distress concept. And those concepts Celia introduced himself. Later, he regretted it. And this is what popular psychology picked up. I think I even read a couple of years ago in Cosmopolitan this idea, a very simplified idea of Celia, that you need to change how you perceive your stress. So to change this distress, bad stress, into good stress, eustress. So eustress is introduced as a positive and helpful stress when you're motivated to work, and something that helps you to improve your performance, reach your goals or challenges. While distress is a bad, negative kind of stress, something that we feel when we are stressed out, when we feel overwhelmed or anxious. It occurs when we perceive stress, when we have this subjective perception of stress as anxious, unfair, or painful. The problem, and popular psychology picked it up and started to represent them as two different kinds of stress. One is dangerous for you, damaging for your body. It's better to avoid distress. And one is good. There is this feeling of challenge. It's helpful. We feel motivated, and this is good stress. And representing this idea that we need to change our attitude and Therefore, in order to transform bad stress, distress into eustress. The problem with Celia, the problem with this representation is that basically they are same. They are not different, and it's even possible to claim that this distinction into eustress and distress basically doesn't make sense. Celia claimed that during eustress and distress, the body undergoes virtually same non-specific responses because stress is non-specific response. There is no difference, at least in first stages, which are substantial stages of stress, stages of adaptation. It's only the matter mostly of perception, the way Celia understood it. Was it if this stress helped you to adapt to the situation, or was this stress useless stress? So those are stages, and basically it's same stress. There is certain amount of stress that is needed to adapt to a certain situation, but if it's too much stress, or if stress failed, then it's considered distress. But recently, last year in this paper, and I agree with them, they claim that because of this confusion and ambiguity, the way concept eustress and distress use, and because they're biologically same processes, it may be better to get rid of this distinction and just to preserve term stress to avoid it. And the other problem is that in different in different scientific areas, they're used differently. Like for psychology, eustress would mean good perception of stress, positive perception of stress, and betterment of cognition, while for biology, the stress would rather mean better survival or something like that, or increased longevity. So biology wouldn't care about subjective perception. So they are used in a different way, and it's hard to, and because the biological basis is same for both types of stress, it kind of doesn't make sense to distinguish, except for popular psychology to sell it advice on how to transform good stress and into bad stress into good stress. And it is mostly associated with the subjective perception. For example, if the challenge was high and if you needed great level of stress to adapt to some situation, for example, studying at SAS, and the stress worked, you adapt to this situation, you complete it, you got your diploma, and you perceived it as it worth it, that would be probably eustress. But if you went through the same stress and you failed, you didn't get your diploma or something happened, the process of stress is same, but you just failed. So all the stress you perceive it as useless. It didn't worth it. It didn't work anyway. It happens sometimes. And of course, it's distress because it was a waste of stress, of body mobilization, of the energy, and all the night that you didn't sleep and all the tasks that you completed. Or you never know, because what is useful, what is this distress that is perceived positively or what is perceived negatively? Because even if you get your diploma and you subjectively perceive at this stage your stress as worth it, then it turned out that your diploma won't help you in your life. And you might still reevaluate it as a negative stress. So it's not that simple, which stress worth it, which stress doesn't worth it. The other thing is that something happened that you don't want to happen, for example, pandemic, right? And you manage, it put you in a state of stress. Stress was helpful, it helped you to adapt to the situation, for example, at least partially. but the situation is, it could never happen. So even if the adaptation was successful, but the situation is terrible to which you have to adapt. So it's hard to figure out if it's a distress or eustress. So you're happy you adapted to coronavirus pandemic, or you're not happy. Is it a eustress or a distress? And you never know. Maybe in the future, this experience would be helpful to you in some way, or maybe on the contrary, you'll waste the year of your life. It will happen so. And you will never find out if basically if this stress was useful, if it's a eustress or distress. The way popular psychology perceive it is how you feel about it. It's all about concentration on you. And normally, it's dangerous to concentrate on the very feeling of stress, because when there is a stress, means there is a stressor. And this stress is connected to the stressor. So you need stress to adapt to a certain situation that bothers you, that bothers your body. And stress is, it might fail. Sometimes your body, your energy might be exhausted until you reach the stage of adaptation, if it's even possible. Sometimes the stressor might be so great that it'll just kill you, and you'll fail to adapt to it. But it's not about how you feel that this thing is dangerous to you. The process is in your body. It's not that the stress is killing you. It's the stressor that your body is trying to adapt to is killing you. And by switching the attention from the stressor to the very feeling of stress and presenting it as dangerous is dangerous itself, because instead of studying for exams, you have a feeling of stress because you need to prepare for exams. You would, for example, contact a psychologist or just read a self-help book of how to deal with the stress while you need to be preparing for exam. And this might increase your stress even more, because instead of preparing to exam, you are bothered by the very feeling of your stress and reading self-help books. And stress might be so overwhelming that you will fail to prepare for exam, because you're so bothered with your stress, because you're feeling stressed because of your stress, and you're not getting ready for an exam. Alistair Smith, if we talk about stress and education, within the scope of learning and education, stress is perceived in a similar way, like something negative, something to avoid. Alistair Smith is a famous UK educator and teaching consultant. He published popular books on education, and this is what he writes. This is the representation of how stress is perceived within the context of education is learning. He claims that stress is not good, is the enemy basically of learning. It's not a good condition for learning. While good condition of learning includes positive attitude, and where challenge is high and anxiety and self-doubt is low. It doesn't make sense if we consider just what I told you, because we can say that this adaptational reaction that is connected with stress, it's also connected with the very process of learning, and now this is recognized more and more, and the very process of memory formation. Basically, learning as such and memory formation as such also can be seen as adaptational process, and therefore the link between stress and learning is very straightforward. We can claim that stress is learning of a body. The adaptation of a body is learning to deal with new situations. So, but also on the other hand, if we consider that stress is an adaptive phenomenon, if we consider that it helps us to adapt to a new situation, it is directly connected to the process of learning and memory formation. So this is a crow, and it's a young one. I know I asked this question, some of you, but do you remember why young crows, they are 1 year old, why their heads are bigger?
Because of the hair and the head.
Feathers. Yes, because of the feathers, because their feathers are on their head are lifted up all the time, unlike old birds whose feathers are not that much lifted up. That's because young crows are stressed all the time because they're curious, they are learning, right? Everything is stressful to them because they concentrate on this novel thing and they're trying to learn them. Everything is new to them. They're curious in this way. So same with humans, except for we don't have this kind of manifestation. We can claim, well, that childhood is a very stressful period of our life because there is lots of new stuff to learn and everything is foreign. We are not adapted to most of what constitutes our life. And now there is more and more of understanding that, and its links in neuroscience with learning and memory formation and the process of cognition. For example, it is claimed in this paper that basically stress, the hormones and neurotransmitters that are associated with stress might be considered, might be seen, and should be seen as the main major modulators of human learning. So we can claim that stress, the stressful reaction, is learning as such, as something that is in what learning is coded. The initial and on the level of psychological manifestation, so the whole body is involved in the reaction of stress on all levels, but on the level of psychological on the psychological level, stress is manifested in anxiety, increased attention and focus, and activation of memory. So we do activate, mobilize our psychological forces. We pay attention to something, and this we memorize something because it's important, because we are stressed, like in post-traumatic stress disorder. The same principle, but kind of too much when our memories are too vivid and we can't get rid of them. When we stress, we do form memories. There are other processes when the other question is that sometimes to adapt, we actually need to forget something. That it's more complicated. Let's just concentrate for now on formation of a memory. So on the psychological level, those manifestations of stress, they cause impact on the process of learning. And in Marianne Joel's and her colleagues' paper, I like their approach, and they mentioned the initial experiment Maurice Watermace with rats. This is the first experiment that caused association of stress with a better cognition. So in this experiment, rats had to find a platform, and it turned out that if rats have a moderate amount of stress, it was easier for them to find the platform faster, and they were memorizing for a long time where the platform is, for a longer time where the platform is located. And therefore, it was concluded that moderate level of stress, they do increase memorization and cognition, so they improve learning process. But on the other hand, when rats are too stressed, and the level of stress was controlled by the temperature of water. So to make rats stressed, they just lowered the temperature of water, and this in a colder water with higher level of stress, rats were able to find the platform faster and memorize whereas the platform better. So their cognition was enhanced. But when the level of stress is too high, when the water is too cold, it works in the opposite way. So rats might even fail to find the platform. But Marianne Joels and her colleagues, they claim that the dogma that formed as a result of this experiment, the dogma that moderate level of stress helps learning, and if there is extra stress, it intervenes with learning in a negative way. They just claim that we shouldn't distinguish on this bad stress and stress that is bad for learning and stress that is good for learning, because the second thing that happened when it was harder for rats to learn, we can claim that it wasn't stress, it was an adaptive reaction. The body just switched to a different strategy of preservation of energy. It was maybe not adaptive, but we can see it as a failed stress. So stress is learning when we try to adapt, when we try to learn, but this was just a switch of strategy. We can call it a failed stress, a failed adaptation, but maybe we shouldn't call it stress and just associate stress with enhanced cognition and adaptation. The other thing that they claim also important, they try to solve, the quote. The other thing they try to solve is the idea that stress can interfere in a negative way with learning and in a positive way. They claim they want to coin the universal understanding of stress as just helping learning or as associated with learning. But there are a couple of requirements for stress to improve learning. And requirements are that when stress is experienced, it's supposed to be in the context and around the time of the event that needs to be remembered. So when you stress, for example, about the exam or about Nietzsche, trying to understand what he is writing, what does he mean, then this stress that occurs, that connected with the context of what you're learning, if you stress about Nietzsche, it will help you to associate, to learn Nietzsche better, because you pay attention, you try to understand, you mobilize your energy to comprehend it. The other question is, when you're getting ready to exam, the question is whether you stress about the fact of exam or the fact that you need to present something wise during the exam. But still, it works well. When you stress, when it's closer to a deadline, you feel enough stress to actually mobilize your forces and study better. And it has to be stress that oriented on the context of what you're learning. And it's true that if, for example, there is different stress while you're preparing for exam. For example, you're fighting with your friends, and instead of preparing to exam, and you feel stressed because of this fight, this stress will not help you to prepare for the exam, and this stress might be considered that influencing bad on your learning process. It will influence in a negative way for exam preparation. But at the same time, we can't claim that this is not the stress that interferes in a negative way with the process of learning, because it's still something that manifests the process of learning, because you're paying attention to the fight with your friend. You're trying to understand your friend. It's very important to you. You're concentrating on this fight. You're concentrating on this situation. You're actually learning. You're adapting to this situation. You think about it constantly. And you're trying to reach out to your friend and to talk with them, or you're avoiding them and just thinking about what happened, right? So it's still stress, and it's still adaptive stress. The other thing is, with the process of learning something that you needed to learn, exam, it will interfere, this process of learning and adaptation to your situation with a friend and a conflict. This kind of adaptation and learning will interfere with other process of adaptation and learning that you had to be originally stressed about. So it is possible to claim that stress is it's not something that interferes with learning in a negative way. That is learning as such, a representation of learning as such. The recent trend of claiming that capitalism is a source of our stress, which is true. Especially if capitalism is just the present order and all we are stuck in, there was no way out of it. So it is recent trend to claim that such negative things as in this paper, this great paper, titled Anxious, Depressed, You Might Be Suffering from Capitalism. They do represent exploitation that exists in capitalism as a source of stress, as a source of those negative sides of life that we experience. And it is true, it can be proven scientifically that work for corporation exploitation that we suffer causes stress. When we overwhelmed from work, it causes stress. But at the same time, like the burnout that we constantly feel in the present society, it does cause stress. But my problem with this trend, even though I agree with it, that it implies that if there would be no capitalism in some alternative order, we wouldn't feel stress, which is not true, because we got used to capitalism, even if it's terrible, even if there is great pressure and some other order is possible, it's going to be a new order, and it will require even more stress. This is something that is, I think, terrible thing to recognize, but and we will have to adapt to it, and maybe we are still within capitalistic order because we are not ready for even more stress, because we're fed up with the stress that this capitalism is causing us. So at least it's something that we got used to, and to a certain extent we adapted to it. And this might be a problem, because the alternative order that we are all expecting, we're expecting it as something more relaxing, something with less negative sides of life. But if it's going to be new, and if it is going to be new in comparison to capitalism, because capitalism is all we know, then logically it would cause even more stress. And this is the problem with this critical representation of capitalism, as presenting alternative orders as bearing less kind of negative sides and making life more relaxing. The other, that basically capitalism is killing you, but it's not that we have options whether capitalism is killing us or nothing is killing us. It's just the choice of what exactly will kill us. Because a revolution to overthrow capitalism, in my view, is supposed to be even more stressful than capitalism itself. And because revolution is understood as some radical changes, and the more radical change is, the more stress you need for it, the more accumulated stress you need for it. The other thing is capitalism is killing you. It causes stress because it's existing order and because it's currently our life. But it's not, in my view, it is our stress that we have to, it's exploiting our stress, right? It's not exploiting us, it's exploiting our stress, precisely even in popular psychology idea that we need to take control over our stress, and presenting the ideal healthy model of human as not stressed. This is this exploitation. You pay attention to you, help yourself with pop psychology tricks, and don't blame anything else except for it. But stress, our ability to feel stress, is kind of all we have. And the choice is not to whether we won't feel stress because of capitalism or anything else, or we will feel stress. The possible choice is rather what we will feel stress about. Revolution or capitalism. It's not the choice of feeling stress or not feeling stress. This is a great quote that just represents stress as a part of life. It's just a part of something that demonstrates what our passion is. It's something. It's like the breath of life, when we are sometimes more relaxed, sometimes less relaxed, but it's basically is those stages in how life represents itself. So in the same way, like different stages of existence, biological existence of our body. And we remember from Kierkegaard, he wasn't talking about stress because it's a more biological concept, but he was talking about anxiety. And basically all we have is stress, right? All we have with the way we adapt, the way we learn, the way our body functions, the way we live and survive, we can call it stress. And there is nothing else to manage except for stress. And when we talk about stress management, the popular concept, it's just basically saying that we live our life because we have nothing to manage except for our stress. And it's also questionable whether we can sometimes manage our stress or it just manages us. This is the quote from Zizek in his recent book on pandemic. He was discussing the recent society of people who are burned out, who are exhausted, and this idea that within current stage of capitalism we are exploiting ourselves. There is this demand to get better, to work harder, to study better, to compete with other people for survival, and it's not that much now that others are exploiting us, although this happens, the very system is exploiting us, causing stress. And this demand to be better is also exploitation of the system, and to compete with each other, to survive on expense of trying to be better than others. So discussing and problematizing this current problem, he also mentions, for example, the burnout of medical workers, right, who suffered during and still suffer during the pandemic with the workload that was imposed on them. So we do complain that within capitalism we are exhausted because of this demand imposed on us because we exploiting ourselves. But what is the difference between medical workers who are also overloaded with work and work overtime? How is this different? And this is a crucial difference because they also feel stress, but their stress is kind of meaningful, and the way they are tired is meaningful, while the way we are tired in capitalist society is kind of meaningless. So it's not, and I don't think that people initially don't want to feel stressed, that it's not, we know that it's not natural for us, we just want to relax. I think we are fine with feeling stress without this perspective that is imposed on us, that we should be like naturally relaxed and not feeling overworked. This is problematic because it's not a matter if we feel relaxed and this is healthy for us, or we feel stressed and it's not healthy for us. It's a matter how you use your stress. It's a matter if you overwork, if what you do, and work is stress, as learning, and it's a matter of if it makes sense. And the other, and normally what makes sense is what is useful for community. What is, if I think we are okay doing a lot of work if we consider it meaningful for others, so meaningful for ourselves. And it's completely different thing if we do some administrative work and consider it meaningless. We are not okay with it. So it's basically, the question is on emancipating our stress from exploitation, right? Because what capitalism exploits is our ability to be stressed, and it exploits it in a meaningless way for us. It's just waste of energy, waste of our ability to adapt to something. And on the other hand, we can, the same stress, same ability to adapt and to learn, to create something and to live life can be used in a more useful way, in a more worthwhile way, like those medical workers did during the pandemic. That's all for today.